Hi, John Ferguson. I'm at 241 South Madison. So essentially the coach house is looking into my backyard. I have 3 of the 20-plus kids on the block that Bob was talking about earlier. So, it kind of hits us. My wife's going to talk a little bit more about how we feel about the children and this business. But I kind of bring a different perspective. I think you have a lot of people coming up and talking that they've been living here for 20 years. My wife and I, we moved here from the city. We didn't view LaGrange as a destination type of spot. What we moved here for was the community and the family environment. When we moved into our neighborhood, that was the main draw. We wanted to be in a residential neighborhood. So I asked the council or the commission to think about this decision because I think you're trying to shape a new vision of the future of LaGrange. This is a business that you're going to put into a residential area. It's a risky business, right? So this is a business that people have said, I admire you for the risk that you're taking on in doing this. Is that the right spot to put a riskier business in the middle of a neighborhood that, as other concerned residents have said, we don't know what's going to happen if that business fails? What becomes of that house? And, these are some concerns, and, it's not going to help my property value. It's already been a difficult market for property right now. So, really, I think that we want to convey, as the LaGrange community, the strength of our neighborhoods, the strength of our community, the single-family environment, the things that I think when I talk about LaGrange to people in the city that makes them want to come and move and buy houses in LaGrange. I don't think it's, okay, I live in a residential neighborhood that has a business situated in the middle of it. I don't think that's going to bring much draw. I don't think that's going to help anything to do with our property values. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Kelly Ferguson, and I'm just going to kind of bring a mom's perspective to all this. As John said, we live on the northeast corner of Madison and Maple, which is right around the corner from the establishment. We love all the physical aspects of our house itself. We've spent a lot of time, money, and energy making it the home we live in today. But it's the neighborhood we live in that truly makes it our home. Our kids are constantly running back and forth down the block to play with neighbors. They frequently play in our side yard on Maple Avenue and in our driveway, which enters on Maple Avenue. They ride their bikes around the block, which includes the 200 block of LaGrange Road. Putting a bed and breakfast within 50 feet of my backyard brings in a slew of worries for me as a mother. I moved into this neighborhood because I believe it gave me the opportunity to raise my children in a nice residential community where they could play outside freely without the worry of strangers and cars constantly coming in and out. With having 6 rooms available for people to stay in year-round, we have the potential of having hundreds of different people staying within 50 feet of where my children are playing every year. Not to mention the service vehicles needed to maintain the establishment and the car traffic along the side of my house and pulling in and out of the bed and breakfast driveway. And this is only taking into consideration one bed and breakfast on the block. Imagine the impact of several B&Bs down LaGrange Road. To say this has no adverse effect on our safety or the character of the area is unreasonable. The safety of our children and property is compromised when there are people we don't know coming in and out of the establishment just around the corner. Some may argue that bringing new people to visit LaGrange is a good thing to our businesses. From what I have read, this establishment is meant to house overnight guests of residential families. My parents are good examples of out-of-town guests who visit a couple of times a year and sometimes have to stay in a hotel. Ultimately, they still visit these businesses with us because they're our guests. They would not visit them any more other than they already do if they were to stay closer. No matter how convenient it may be, neither I nor my family would ever support an establishment that compromises the safety of my children and the character of my home when there's a perfectly decent hotel right down the street. As a mother, it's the unknown that is very unsettling. I know that if for some reason I had to sell my house today, I could do it and still be financially stable. I know my kids can walk outside now and feel safe because they don't see strangers around them. I know that I can feel comfortable having my children play outside without worrying about who's down the street. But I feel that this bed and breakfast establishment right around the corner might disrupt all of what makes them feel secure in the range.
Good evening, Joshua Robbins. Maybe not the first person that can't read my handwriting. Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mr. Perry, and all the neighbors that neat to actually see some of our neighbors here. It's like a little block party. We live at 321 South LaGrange Road. We're another one of those newcomer situations. My wife Karen and I relocated from Lincoln Park when we were expecting child number 2. My son is 4.5 and my daughter is 2.5. And our home, our neighborhood, our block is LaGrange Road in the historic residential district. The mere point that it's on LaGrange Road doesn't make it any less of a neighborhood. It is residential. And we chose LaGrange over other communities, in part because of the smart balance and mix of residential as well as the downtown. We were a little concerned moving in, my wife was, with some of the boarded up or empty shops, but the downtown is coming together. It's turning into a vibrant downtown. It's something that we want to see. You see us in our double-wide stroller going to restaurants and Prosino and eating all the time. Kids in the fountain, the stroller in the fountain, all of that. It's our neighborhood. There's been a lot of talk about rehabbing homes, investing in homes, the gateway, and so forth. We made a decision to rescue a sleeping beauty, not as neglected as yours. But we invested a significant amount of money over 3 years ago. We were on the Fullerton House Walk. I think that we and most of our neighbors on LaGrange Road share kind of a special connection because we are the historic residential gateway in town. So we don't tidy things up as much. It's more noticeable. I mean, we are helping market and sell and promote the village every day just by being good neighbors. So it's not about investing in a property because we believe that the market is there, the market's working, and people are maintaining their properties. Some of them are slow to go, but eventually someone will come in and do it. And I don't think it's really about a bed and breakfast either. There are places to stay. They're nice. We've stayed at them around the country. And I don't know if it's so much even about the need of a bed and breakfast. It's really about putting a commercial use in a residential neighborhood. And in this case, specifically, a so-called historic residential neighborhood or district. And when we moved in and we bought the home and we didn't really know what we were getting into and with the amount of work that these homes take, there was one thing that was pretty certain, was that it was going to be a residential neighborhood. Common logic is, one single property, one subject property, so what? It's down the street, doesn't impact me. But as we get into the details and we read the staff report and we read about spot zoning and what the village would have to do, there certainly is a slippery slope. We have kids. LaGrange Road is our street. It is hard to go across the street to your neighbor, but it is still our street. And there's a slippery slope of connecting the commercial district of Countryside. They've got a lot of things coming in, and they're putting in restaurants in our commercial, and we don't want to be squeezed out. And furthermore, if we take any steps to erode the protections that we have in place, the protections that protect us in residential neighborhoods, I think we should open it up to all of LaGrange. That people should let the market do its thing and bring in business and enterprise everywhere, not just in our section, our block, and our street. So I think we can have a vibrant downtown. I think we can do more stuff to bring in outside tax dollars, people dropping their money here versus relying on residents solely. We're doing that. The village has taken a lot of great steps and will continue to support that. But the bottom line is commercial belongs and has a very nice home in a commercial district, not in a residential district. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Bill Johnson at 211 South LaGrange Road in the house that's normally known as the Joel Daly House. I hope that someday you'll call it the Bill Johnson House, but I'm not. I don't have too many points that haven't been made already. My key issue is we live in a residential area that is purely residential, and to put a business, any business, into a residential area, it starts you down a path that could lead to a completely commercial area. So I think there's a place for a B&B perhaps in LaGrange, but it should be in a commercial area rather than in a purely residential area. One issue I have that was not in the application, but maybe it should have been. It came out of a discussion I had with Tim Trumper at a social event recently. He was trying to explain to me why he thought this was a great idea, and I was trying to explain my opposition to it. And in characterizing the benefits, he said this would be a great place for events and receptions, parties, gatherings, social events, things like that. That's not in the application, and you think about the congestion we've talked about with 6 guest cars coming in and out of the property. If you open this and expanded it to more social gatherings, I'd be concerned about more congestion. I'll give you a personal observation. I'm not a long-term resident of LaGrange Road. I've lived there for 4 years, but I've been in LaGrange and LaGrange Park for about 25 years. Through several corporate relocations, I've moved in and out of the area. My family and I could have moved to any area in the Chicago metropolitan area, but we always came back to LaGrange and LaGrange Park because we love this area. Our last move was not a commercial relocation. We're on Loyola in LaGrange. And about 4 years ago, after admiring the beautiful, stately, gracious homes along LaGrange Road, I noticed the for sale sign in front of his house. We had no particular interest in moving, but my admiration for this neighborhood prompted us to talk to our realtor, and I think I'm helping to keep Joan Smothers in business. So we bought the house, but I can tell you if there had been a bed and breakfast or any business on the 4 blocks of LaGrange Road in that residential area, we absolutely would not have bought it. And so now I think about, I have no plans to move, but when it's time to move, I'd like a ready market for my house. And if we had a bed and breakfast or 2 or 3 or a lawyer office or a contractor's office or any other commercial establishment in that fine, gracious neighborhood, I fear that I wouldn't have a great market for my house. I looked through the material that you see in advance of this meeting, and I was struck by one thing. When it characterizes amendments to zoning, it guides to not take amendments lightly. And the phrase I saw that struck me was the packet says the public good demands or requires the amendment be made. That's a pretty high threshold. The public good demands or requires the amendment be made. And what I haven't heard a compelling reason articulated for doing this. I see the owner having a desire for an interesting career in retirement, but that doesn't constitute a compelling reason to make such a dramatic change in the zoning. Thank you.
My name is Angela Curran, and I live at 430 South 6th Avenue in LaGrange. I, too, picked up on the same phrase that Mr. Johnson was talking about, that, amending the zoning code really requires an examination of what the public good is, and it's not something that should be, taken lightly. The thing that concerned me, there were some comments made earlier. I have not seen or heard any comprehensive needs assessment for a guest house, bed and breakfast in LaGrange, and if I were sitting on the zoning commission or looking at it as from a trustee's perspective, I think I'd want to see a more comprehensive needs assessment to first answer that question, is this something that would be of benefit in LaGrange? But let's assume that the answer to that is yes. What concerned me is I don't think that there is a comprehensive and thorough analysis of the options that have been presented through the documents that we've seen. I think the only discussion we've seen is, would this be a good special use permit for those 4 blocks between 47th Street and Cosset Avenue on LaGrange Road? There are many other options, I think, that have to be analyzed. If you are going to say, yes, we think this is a good idea in LaGrange. For example, and let's think outside the box here. Everyone's making reference to how close it would be to the Central Business District. Why not in the Central Business District? I know that there's a lot of vacant office property on the 2nd floor in commercial business districts. Let's think outside the box. Maybe that's the right place for a guest house. There are many mixed-use blocks already located on the north and south sides right along the tracks. You already have commercial, mixed commercial, multifamily, some single-family residential. Perhaps there would be less of an adverse impact, and that would be a more appropriate space. LaGrange Road is not the only residential area with busier streets. There's Ogden Avenue, there's 47th Street, Brainerd. So I think to single out LaGrange Road because it has a busier traffic pattern basically is an unfair assessment. I think after you do that, then maybe we're in a better position as a community to decide where would the most appropriate place for this be. I have been in the village for 14 years. I've seen the village and the homeowners on LaGrange Road make make a lot of effort here to preserve the residential flavor of LaGrange Road and Cossett, LaGrange Road between Cossett and 47th Street. My understanding was that the goal was always to make that section of LaGrange Road just as much as desired residential street as all the other residential streets in LaGrange. So I think singling out those few blocks to allow a bed and breakfast really ruins a lot of those efforts. The issue of vacant houses or houses on the market for long periods of time in need of updating, that is not unique to LaGrange Road. There are many houses throughout the community that have coach houses, garages that are in disrepair. If that's the issue, then we need to focus more on what are the village's efforts to make sure that homeowners maintain their properties in accordance with the village standards. With respect to the specific restrictions, I too would advocate that we stick to, if we are going to have bed and breakfast, that they be owner occupied. I too think that 6 units is too big. I would second Mrs. Hoygaard's that we go by the bed and breakfast laws. And I think that having a requirement, allowing one every 500 feet is really excessive. Thanks.
Hi, I live at 15 Maple, which is in a unique position of being backed up by the bed and breakfast, and my side yard would also be impacted. Also, in one of the things that I got, they mentioned that maybe some of the workers, the cleaners, would park on Maple. So I would be the back, the side, and the front. I'm not happy with that. Lived in the area for 30 years, and it has been a lovely, quiet residential neighborhood, or I would not have moved here. I'm very concerned with turning it into a business. I think once you open the door to that, if the business fails, what's going to happen? Do we turn it into the Hotel Norland? Anybody who has lived here in the past knows what that was like. There's a lot of concerns with it, but it's a residential area, and I will say with the workers, Tom has tried to be very good with the workers, but I have allowed them to put their ladders on my property because it's a very tight squeeze. I asked them to please close the gate as I have dogs, and it's my property. They cut my section of the gate out, so they have a temporary there. Okay, I understand that work needs to be done. 3 times I went out all in one day, and the gate was still open. My big concern is these are temporary workers. What happens when we've got a bed and breakfast established there? We've got the regular workers. It's not temporary anymore, and that's my concern. Everybody else has pretty much covered what I wanted to, but I am very concerned. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Terry Pappas. I live on 308 South 6th Avenue. Most of the people have said lots of the things, but what I am not a longtime resident, like the few that are here. I moved here buying my house because it was in a residential neighborhood. I ask you to consider all of our residents in our neighborhood, not just one person who wants it. If we do this exception to the zoning for one person, then the next person has the right and the next person has the right. And soon you're on LaGrange Road and you've got 5 businesses that are butting up to what used to be a nice residential neighborhood. It's a nice idea, it's great, but we have a business district. So why don't we keep it in the business district? This is impacting not one person, but the whole community. It affects the image of our community, whether you're on LaGrange Road or you're the next street over or the next street over. It impacts so many people besides the one person who wants to do something. And I find it very presumptuous that somebody would take on such a project when it's was residential, that this would just going to fly through all of us, and that it was automatically accepted. I find that very hurtful to the rest of us here in LaGrange that have bought our houses with the hopes that you would represent us and keep it residential.
Thank you. A lot of my comments, I think, have already been mainly touched upon. What struck me here more than anything tonight is that no matter what side people fall upon in this discussion, there seems to be a lot of talk about golden years, long time in the town, beautiful old homes, and what a wonderful place LaGrange is. That all seems to have managed to take its place here without any bed and breakfasts on LaGrange Road. What we're really talking about here is motels on LaGrange Road. They're in old homes, not new ugly buildings, but they're basically motels with transients in and out of our neighborhood where our children are playing every day, going to school, where we're walking into the business districts. It will never stop at one. If one is allowed, it will push all the way down LaGrange Road. I understand that's what the zoning will put in place. And don't be mistaken, realtors are standing by as we speak to carve up LaGrange Road into business areas. So while I have to commend the Perrys for their well thought out plans, for their golden years, making our neighborhood unsafe for our children, raising our taxes, and destroying the values of our homes is not a good retirement decision for the rest of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
I live at 328 South LaGrange Road with 2 kids and 2 dogs. There's not a lot more I can add, but I just want to give another voice. The reason why I chose, and I'm not a long-term resident of LaGrange, I've been here almost 5 years, and chose it because of the residential neighborhood, proximity to great schools, the family environment. And so, I'm very concerned about bringing commercial into these 4 blocks. And it's 4 blocks, and we're not talking about one property. We can open it up to a much bigger area, and also including at this time in the application, so where else is it going to go? And we don't want this part of LaGrange Road, it's this beautiful historic home, to look like LaGrange Road south of 47th Street or LaGrange Road north of Ogden. We're very proud of our homes, and we take, such pride in them. And then also the defined area. The staff believes that B&B would be appropriate in the historic district and in areas known for more traffic and is characteristic of residential neighborhood. This is a residential neighborhood. My kids play, they ride their bikes, and that's another concern, like Kelly was talking about, safety. I mean, my children ride their bikes. I'm on the same road, same side, and my kids ride downtown on their bikes, walking to school. And anyone who lives on the Grange Road, we're all very careful about backing out. My worry is someone's going to hit some child who's going down the street, who isn't, who's used to people looking for them. And obviously we will teach them, to look, but, someone flying out of who isn't familiar with the safety and the concerns about backing out. So that's about it.
Hi, Helene Lockhart. My husband Alex and I live at 136 South LaGrange Road, where we've lived for 20-something years, and one house off of LaGrange Road for nearly 20 years before that, where we raised our children in those 2 homes. When I initially saw the proposal for the bed and breakfast, I thought, this is charming, because our town is so lovely. We're in a beautiful neighborhood. We are the front yard of LaGrange. I think we need to really be cognizant of how we want our front yard to look. Those 4 blocks are the front yard of our town. So we need to be very careful about that. I think LaGrange, a bed and breakfast bed and breakfasts in general would be very nice in the town, not in a corridor, but if there was one here, one there, in the historic district or just in LaGrange in general. And if they were owner occupied, because My husband and I have stayed in bed and breakfasts, both in this country and overseas. And the most charming thing about them is when you're part of a neighborhood. You don't feel like a guest in a guest house or a guest in a hotel. You feel like a house guest. And I don't know if a proposal with this many rooms is going to fit that very well. You fit much better in a residential neighborhood if it is situated so that you are like a house guest. Maybe 3 rooms, maybe 4 accommodating guests, which keeps down the number of cars and keeps down the number of just in and out traffic and things, and with an owner living on the property to continue that whole feeling. I think that sort of thing would be compatible in LaGrange from my perspective as a property owner. I like LaGrange Road, have loved living there because it's a combination of kind of city, kind of suburb, not really completely either one. And the historic aspect and our wonderful downtown, I think, would be very attractive for people who enjoy staying in bed and breakfast, who are mostly older folks coming in. It's not a bunch of, that's not spring break type guests you're getting there. So that, I think, would be compatible. But I really think that the village needs to be very careful to preserve the front yard aspect of the 4 blocks, to be very careful to keep the nature of the residential area as residential, as many of the residents who spoke tonight have said, so that the people who are there, the people who are operating a bed and breakfast, have it as a house guest type situation. My husband and I will soon be selling our home as we're aging out of the big home, so we're also concerned about the property values. I do think that done properly, this could be beneficial to the town and to our local property values, but it needs to be done very carefully and taking into consideration many of the points residents here have made. Lou Hageman sent around a letter, which I assume he sent to your committee that you perhaps have received. He also sent copies to the residents and made many valid points in there that deserve your careful consideration. Thank you.